Can everyone hear me? It's all right? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for inviting me here. We've been talking a lot about ancient history, and I'm going to start from a few days ago to bring everything together. A few days ago, the kosher market on the eastern edge of Paris, where I work, opened with new paint, surveillance cameras, and the resilience to prove that they could reopen again after a gunman killed 4 hostages there 2 months ago in a terrorist attack that really shattered Paris. In the days after the shooting, there was a video. The killer had taken the video at a GoPro camera. And in the video, he demanded the origin of one of the store hostages. And then he shot him when he replied Jewish. That story haunts me every day. In my own office is near La Défense in the financial district of Paris, where police guards are posted 24 hours a day outside our office. They're posted around most of the media offices in Paris. And it forced me to think every day of my own ancestors, a reminder of the sacrifices that they all made and the choices that they made under threat. Years ago, I started on my own quest to investigate my identity and to understand why my Jewish ancestors converted and guarded their true religion in secret for generations, dating back to the Inquisition. This is the Carvajal family from circa 1930s in San Jose, Costa Rica. I grew up as a Catholic in the San Francisco Bay Area of California, knowing nothing about our history. And so in middle age, like most people, when we start to look at our genealogy, I started unraveling our past. And I could not understand why our ancestors and relatives had anything to hide in contemporary times, especially living in California. What was the risk? But today, in light of what happened in Paris, I appreciate the gift of the Anousim, who were forced to convert and live creative double lives for generations to pass on their legacy in secret. The Carvajals, the Chacons, the Arias Davila family, all lines in a cloud of ancestors that led from Costa Rica to Spain. Try and remember this. This is my great-grandfather in the center in the suit and his wife. Both lines, I later discovered, descended from Sephardic Jews. Oops. I had a hunger to know who I am, to erase my doubts. At the start of my quest, I think like many of you, if you're doing your own genealogy, I started with family anecdotes. My cousin remembers that my great-aunt, Luz, the light, kept a bronze menorah in her cupboard in a garden apartment in San Jose, Costa Rica. And sometimes he watched her praying by it. I never asked her about it because I had no idea about our past. In later years, people would ask me constantly about my Sephardic last name, Carvajal, which in some spellings means lost place, rejected. It was the clue that set me off, but something that I ignored for years and years. Now I picture Aunt Luz's menorah as a worn object touched by many hands. It was little clues like these that pressed me onward. I never knew where it would lead, but I knew it could change the story of who I am. My Costa Rican relatives remember that my great-grandfather, a tax collector, that's important, would join his close friend, a rabbi, every weekend. The family would gather for Saturday lunches, but outwardly they represented themselves as Catholics. My father remembers making First Communion, and his father didn't attend his First Communion. Later, I discovered that Aunt Luz was the family historian who guarded the legacy of the Anousim, but I had to become a family detective to figure that out. I started with a family tree made by my father. It went back 11 generations. I knew the line reached to Spain, but I didn't know exactly where. And later I learned that many of my ancestors were descended from some of the early founders of Costa Rica. One was a judge from the south of Spain who died of a heart attack traveling from Honduras to Costa Rica. His son drowned on the same journey. What drove these people to abandon prosperous lives in Spain? for a distant country's little wealth. There's a specialist in France, a therapist, who studies the psychology of genealogy. And she believes that the starting point to analyze the family tree is to immerse yourself in the homeland of ancestors, to study the history, the geography, and culture of the time. She believes that we're all links in a chain and can be affected by what she calls the ancestor syndrome, unconsciously affected by their dramas and unfinished business. She calls it the phantom in the crypt, crypto-Jews. So that was my strategy at the beginning, when I lacked information and I had basically family anecdotes and some genealogical information. I immersed myself by moving to the south of Spain for a summer with my family. And we settled in Arcos de la Frontera, in a white house, a short walk from the old Jewish quarter, and a synagogue that's there in the back, that was transformed into an orphanage during the Inquisition. It's what I call a form of right brain genealogy. It was more of an emotional connection. I was trying to connect with old souls, old Jewish souls. I look for double messages from the past in symbols, in art, in music, and food. Some were obvious. Sefardi, that's the name of the street in Arcos de la Frontera. Some were hiding in plain sight, but the meaning was lost in contemporary times. For example, the brotherhoods. These are the cofradias that march every Holy Week in in Arcos de la Frontera. There are 15 of them, and you can see the peak hoods that they wear. And for an American, for me, it's like a symbol of the Ku Klux Klan, but the Ku Klux Klan had actually copied them from Spain and date back to the Inquisition, when inquisitors would wear them and to cover their face and to look anonymous. But when you ask people what the symbols are in the town, they say it's an act of penitence, it's a way to retreat into themselves, and the meaning is lost. We talked earlier about double codes, the secrets that Portuguese Jews left as an act of defiance on the border. And here, oops, I forgot to change. And here's another that gives me chills. This is a singer of saetas. They're sung only at Easter time, and they're sung a cappella. And the singers are offering public prayers to the image of Christ or the Virgin Mary. It's a demonstration of faith. But what's the secret code here? The music has the rising and falling notes of a prayer of atonement sung at Yom Kippur to annul promises. This saeta singer is actually singing in the synagogue. But when I ask her about the connections to Jews, there is no connection for her family, who's been singing for 3 generations. For her, it's just something that comes inward from the heart and the soul. But it's one of the legacies left behind by the conversos who found ways to communicate in a double code. I show this, oops. This is the Jewish quarter in Arcos de la Frontera, and every year the cofradias would pass by the Jewish quarter carrying a pallet with Jesus crucified right by the Jewish quarter. I think it dates back to some symbolism from earlier times, because some of the cofradias go back for centuries. But if you ask people about that, they don't make the connection. The meaning is lost. Also, the bell tower. This is a town that has bell ringers that still live in the church. And they communicate with the bells, including an Inquisition march that they don't use anymore, but they used to toll the parade of prisoners out of the town along a street along the summit where they would have to jump if they wanted to escape. But what's interesting here is that the oldest bell, there are a dozen, is inscribed with the name of a Jewish bell maker, and it's the bell that keeps the time of the town. So for centuries, this bell maker, this Jewish bell maker, has left his legacy. But again, it's not something that people know about. Am I doing okay on time? I'm okay on time? You have 10 minutes. Okay. Okay. One other quick example. This is a ring showing the constellation outside one of the major churches in Arcos de la Frontera. If you go on a tour with one of the guides, she'll tell you it's a folkloric symbol where families stand and hold their babies after a baptism. But actually, it was created for the forced baptisms of Jews and Muslims. Again, the meaning is lost. So I tried to connect with the past through all these symbols, but I wanted something that was more satisfying to me because I still had doubts about who we were. I had a lot of anecdotes, I had a lot of little clues, but I wanted something more. And so I tried a more classic approach using genealogy. And I had hit a wall on the Carvajal line. I think that happens to a lot of people. We all have our walls. Mine is Maria. I can't get past her. And I started looking at our other lines, which is very important because you have a cloud of ancestors. And there's patterns often among Anousim where cousins were marrying cousins. So if you hit a wall, you start looking at other lines. So I started looking at the line of my grandmother, Angela Chacon, and next to her is my father, Arnoldo, and my aunt, Eugenia. And I had assumed that my grandmother, was descended from a Sephardic Jewish line because she was an orphan. She was married off in a very clannish way to another family, but I had no proof. But eventually through genealogy, and today, as many of you probably know, there are many, many more resources, genealogy, social networks. I was able to trace my grandmother back through my grandfather, Julio Chacon. He was an accountant. And through his line, I discovered that we were descended from Juan Vasquez de Coronado, a conquistador from Salamanca, Spain, who eventually became the governor of Costa Rica. Vasquez married a Spanish aristocrat, Isabel Arias Davila, a daughter of a conquistador, and descended from a prominent family from Segovia. And that was my eureka moment. History books are filled with references to the Arias Davila family, who were pursued by the Inquisition. They were secret Jews investigated for heresy and Judaizing. Their dramas are in legados, leather Inquisition folders, in the Madrid National Archives, and almost 200 pages are devoted to their daily habits. The Inquisition gave us that gift of information because they were so methodical. So there were pages devoted to their wedding rituals, their burial clothes, their prayers, their taste for adafida lamb stew, which was often a sign of secret Jews, because it was slow cooked on hot coals overnight and served on the Sabbath. It was the most prominent trial in the medieval history of Segovia, with 231 witnesses. And the patriarch, Diego Arias Davila, was the royal financial advisor to two kings and dealt with taxes, like my great-grandfather, and was very much loathed and was involved in many power struggles. His son was the bishop of Segovia for 30 years. That often happened, where conversos found powerful positions in the Catholic Church. Many members of the family of these ancestors were accused of heresy and Judaizing, and to escape the power of the Inquisition in Spain, they went to Costa Rica because the Inquisition was less powerful there, there was less wealth there, and this is one of the ancestors who went to Panama, became a governor, and this is a bust of him in Panama, and he was yet another one who was also accused by his enemies of Judaizing, which is very common. See? So once I had the information, this genealogical information, I did the same thing. I went back to Segovia. I look for the synagogue that was funded by one of my ancestors. They led secret lives as Jews. They were conversos, but in particular, as is common with Anousim, the women were the ones who really guarded the rituals. And so my great-grandmother, 16 times removed, donated money for a synagogue. There are records of her providing oil for the synagogue. The synagogue no longer exists, but you can walk through the Jewish quarter and see the castle, the Alcazar, where my great-grandfather, 16 times removed, was a royal financial advisor. And this is the tower where the family lived, the Arias Davila family. And very fittingly, since he was involved with taxes, it now houses the tax department in Segovia. So his tax legacy lives on. Again, looking for symbols and clues. This is a coat of arms of the Arias Davila family. And I found this really interesting. I don't know for a fact if this is truly what it means. But if you look at the W sign on the right-hand lower side, often this W symbol was used as a secret code by Marranos. But I don't know if truly if that's what it means, but I was curious about when I read it, and if this was a double way of communicating. And I mentioned that because I was entranced in Spain by El Greco paintings of these W symbols that keep showing on some of the figures in his paintings. It could be. It could be. Okay, 3 minutes. Okay, it could be. In fact, he was married to a converso, El Greco. So there are hypotheses that maybe that's what it means. I don't know for a fact, but I find myself constantly looking for mysterious messages. Finally, I feel a special connection to my ancestor in particular, Doña Elvira. It was clear from the Inquisition records that she yearned to maintain family bonds. And I was startled when I discovered Doña Elvira's real name, which she changed after her conversion. She was called Clara. It's a strong name that means clear and bright. By coincidence, or maybe not, we named our daughter the French version Claire. Now I hope it is my daughter's turn to shine bright. I believe that the single most important gift I can give Claire is our family story. The more children know about their family story, the more resilient they are. They're more self-confident. Our family has lived through highs and lows. We have survived and flourished. We treasure our past because it shapes us even today. I have one last thought. The Spanish ambassador made a very optimistic comment this week about a passage of a bill to grant citizenship to descendants of forced converts. My heart is in Spain, and I want my paperwork to be there too. And I'm not talking about a train pass. I seek a passport. I'm told by the World Sephardic Union in Jerusalem that they're already preparing a Spanish language test and another test examining knowledge of Spain. There will be a base of about 500 questions to study from for the final test. I think that's fitting, less than one question a year since the expulsion. Thank you very much for inviting me.